No matter how hard they try, a majority of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and even more don't feel secure with money. With no money left over after the bills are paid, it makes it nearly impossible to save for the future and reach long term financial independence. That's why in this episode of the podcast, I talk with financial expert Bill Westrom on how folks can break the paycheck to paycheck cycle, save for the future, and gain financial freedom. All right, my guest today is Bill Westrom, the co founder and CEO of truthandequity.com and the architect behind Credit Line Banking, a revolutionary banking strategy that's changing how Americans save, invest, and pay off debt. With nearly 30 years in banking and lending, Bill has seen firsthand how the traditional financial system is failing families, and he set out to fix it. Bill's mission is simple: to empower everyday Americans with the tools and strategies banks use to stay ahead. His innovative approach has helped families pay off debt up to 4 times faster, turning financial stress into clarity and control. For Bill, it's not just about money, it's about independence, empowerment, and creating a future where everyone can thrive. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Hello, Stephen. How you doing? Thanks for
All
having
right. Well, from our discussions before I hit record, I know we're going to have a very interesting discussion this afternoon. You have a very different take on personal finance and investing that I knew the listeners would want to hear from, and it's important. And the title of the episode talking about breaking free from the financial treadmill everybody seems to be on, and with today's statistics showing that over 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and over 72% don't feel secure with money. Again, they're on that financial treadmill where no matter how fast they run, their finances never seem to get better. What do you think are the leading causes for that?
Well, to be honest with you, those statistics, I don't believe those statistics are that high because I've been in the foxhole with people for 30 years in my career as banking and lending. And I don't think it's that bad. But why are people on the treadmill? Flat out honest answer. Well, there's actually two. One, our financial education in our school system is abysmal. I ask people all the time to rate it 1 to 10, their financial education coming out of school. 9 out of 10 say a 2, which is pretty darn low. And so what that tells you is that most people when their foot hits the street after graduation, they're totally dependent on other people for their financial acumen and future. And so that's number one for the treadmill. And number two is because we're following all the rules. We're doing what we're told, right? We get low rate and low payment loans and don't pay the debt off because it's low rate. You can earn more money over here. Or, all the financial advice we get actually puts us on the treadmill, and it's virtually impossible to get off if we continue to follow all the same advice and the same rules. Mm-hmm. So it's really, we're not doing anything wrong. We're just doing what we're told.
Well, give us some examples of some of those things that we're being told that maybe are that you say are keeping us on the treadmill, so listeners can be alert to what they should be looking at for what they're doing and maybe thinking about doing something different.
Well, let's look at the paycheck, the average American paycheck. So because I'm all about money flow. So let's see where the money's flowing right now. So the average American paycheck, regardless of education and income level, we're losing 30 to 40% right off the top to the feds in taxes and 401ks. So if you just look at a $10,000 a month income, that's $120 a year, and that can be household income or individual. You're looking at $4,000 is already gone before you get to start living. And then you move into the debt section of our lives. 35 to 45% of our paycheck is dedicated to servicing debt. Now, when it comes to debt, well, if you talk to the Dave Ramseys or what have you, debt is bad, debt's bad. Oh my God, you're being an irresponsible consumer. But in the reality of life, you don't have an education, you don't have a car, you don't own a home without it. Our society is built on credit, 100%. So when you look at those two, if we look at the high end, you're looking at $8,500 is going out the door before you even buy gas or groceries.
Mm-hmm.
And then so 8,500 out of a $10,000 income, that leaves $1,500, $2,000 to feed the family and have all the accoutrements.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you can
Well,
see
I mean, some of it, if you're talking about debt, going out the door for debt, if you are a homeowner and have a mortgage, then that debt also represents housing for you, which you do need to live, so that you have that before you get to the 1,500. And whether it's mortgage or rent, you have some sort of debt that you're paying that's basically a living expense.
Yep. Well, and that's true. So, and that's a very good point. So, whether you're a homeowner or not, housing is included in that center section. And housing is expensive in this country. I mean, it's the bottom line. It's just, when we talk about inflation, well, let's quit talking about inflation because it's been a constant since I'm 60. I've been earning money since I was 11, and we look pretty close in age. You tell me what's the same price today as it was when we were 15, 20 years old?
Oh, I
Nothing.
believe you. I'm older than you are, so it's
Yeah.
certainly. But I think I agree with you that there is this. On the one side, you mentioned Dave Ramsey, and I'm sure there are others that toot this horn. But the idea of debt being bad, uh, there's like anything else, there's good cholesterol and there's bad cholesterol. There's good debt and there's bad debt.
Yep.
To an extent, it's really whether you are responsible with it. So if you buy a home that you can afford and a mortgage payment you can afford, then you are building equity as well as having a place to live. Car payment, the same thing. And with credit card debt, it's just a matter of you don't use it to finance your lifestyle. Pay it off every month. So I think that irresponsible debt is bad, but responsible debt, there's nothing wrong with that.
You're 100% correct. And I love the way you put that, responsible debt. And now a home is, it's good debt from the standpoint you've leveraged a small amount of money to acquire an appreciating asset.
Mm-hmm.
That's a number one great move.
Mm-hmm.
However, we have a loan attached to that has interest cost. And, if we take away the labels, taxes, tariffs, interest, fees, it's just cost of doing business.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at that mortgage, if you handed a financial planner $300,000 and he's going to charge you fees to manage your money for you. And those fees are going to those have to come off as a cost to your overall return on investment.
Mm-hmm.
You follow?
Yes.
And the house is the same way, right? Except it's on the credit side of the ledger. And now that's a cost to you and it's going to be a big cost.
Mm-hmm.
And, $500,000 mortgage at 3.5% is going to cost you about $308,000 in interest while you stay on the 360-month treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to do that because a financial advisor said, don't pay that loan off, take the difference and give it to me so we can make more money. Mm-hmm. Which, okay, I'm not saying that's bad advice. But from a quantitative standpoint, let's look at the measurable. Let's look at the data, right? And 360 payments, 30 years, that's a long time, dude, right? And you look at that expense of $308,000, right? Well, that's just whittling away at your investment. Now, we have appreciation on one side, but we got to be careful of appreciation. We saw what happened 15 years ago, right? Boom. Mm-hmm. The real estate market was so inflated, right? And there was nothing underneath it to support it. It popped. Well, we're at the same point again, mm-hmm. right? Because since 15 years, we've gone from, to 12 trillion in debt total to 18. And the mortgage debt of the 18, 12 trillion is mortgage debt. So that's good debt. The only 6 trillion is on the ancillary stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But you've got a public that believes that hanging on to that low rate and low payment loan because it's budgetarily friendly is smart financial advice, why they're like you said earlier, we're struggling paycheck to paycheck. Well, why are we struggling? Well, because we've been taught and told to hang on to that mortgage because it's low rate and low payment. But we're struggling at the other side. How, paycheck to paycheck. We're giving away too much money to the feds, either in taxes because nobody adjusts their exemptions on their W-4, and they're waiting for that tax return at the end of the year while they're deficit spending for 12 months, waiting for the government to give them some of their money back. When if they adjusted their W-4 so they get more of their paycheck, they wouldn't be struggling so much.
That's right.
All right. And number two, again, I'm not opposed to investing your money, and I'm not opposed to Wall Street. I'm opposed to a 401k tax code that people are putting their money through. Mm-hmm. Right? The 401k, I get the employer benefit, et cetera. But when you have to throw it through a tax code window, you've married the IRS to your money for the rest of your life. I think it'd be great if employees would go to their employers and say, look, you can do this without the government involved. If you're going to give me money, just give me money. Mm-hmm. You still get the write-off. Give it to me as a bonus, as a monthly bonus. You know what I'm saying? However we want to structure it, let's work together for my future without the IRS involved. The IRS are not financial people. They're not investors. They have no special training. They're a debt collection agency. That's all they are.
But what would you do? I mean, yes, I see your point. I mean, employer and employee could get together and say, look, let's create a long-term investing benefit, retirement benefit that keeps the government out of it. We get the same matching funds. We put it in the stock market. We do all the same things. But how do you protect it from taxation? If you have investments that are outside of an investment umbrella, then you're going to be paying income tax on the dividends and capital gains on any purchase and sale on any sales within the fund. That's going to eat away at that money as well. So, isn't there a downside to that?
Well, the downside is living in the country and having somebody like the IRS looking over our shoulder and digging into our pocket with every dime we earn. And so the answer to taxes, if you don't want to pay taxes, don't earn an income. Now, I know that sounds silly, right? So you can't do that. So here's my other advice, if you will. Would you rather pay tax on the seed or the harvest? I'd rather pay tax on $1,000 bag of seeds than $100,000 harvest. So when it comes to that, pay the government and get them out of your face. They're not right. Our funds. Just pay
more
them.
Like a Roth IRA, something like that.
Exactly. A Roth is there's a much better way to go because you've got those people out of your hair. But again, an IRA is a tax, a government qualified plan. And to me, that's where you should run because they are not our friends. Pay them and then go handle your savings on your own. And there's another good point. Savings and investing are not the same thing. Mm-hmm. Investing your money is speculative. There's no floor. There's no net. You don't know what's going to end up. Savings is putting it someplace where it's accumulating. You've got a floor and a wall that you can see at 20 years down the road. I've got money. I've got what I put into it.
Yeah, but that can be all you have. It's what you put into it. What's your hedge against inflation? I mean, you're still, even if you're saving there's always going to be some good and some bad. I mean, I agree with you with the Roth to say, look, and it from a tax standpoint, sometimes it can be better to save the tax now on a 401k and pay it later when you're usually in a lower tax bracket. But it's even with a Roth, there are tax implications to it. And as I understand it, it's not where you want to put your money if you're going to need it in the next 5 or 10 years. It's a long-term investment. You can't go taking it out. So I agree with your point that the government has sort of fenced in that money because of the way the tax laws work. That you say, all right, in return for us not taxing you on the growth, then you got to keep it in there for a while.
Well, let me ask a quick question. What's your hedge against inflation today with your paycheck? Because if we're worried about hedging up for inflation down the road, then we got to worry about it today. What can we do today just by waking up and running our lives every day? What can we do to hedge against inflation?
Well, again,
Well,
if you save the money, all you have is the money. But if you save the money and it grows, and historically, the stock market in the long term, I mean, it's no, the closer you get to retirement, to needing the money, the more conservative you need to be on where to put it, obviously. But if you're in your 20s and you're putting that money aside, that has a growth potential that is huge by the time you retire. But if you just put that money in a savings account, you're going to end up with a heck of a lot less to retire on 40 years later, aren't you?
well, here's the quintessential word you use in the whole thing is if. If everything goes smoothly, like everybody says it's going to, then this conversation is moot. But it's the big if. And that's what I'm scared of, for my own personal life. I don't, if is the middle word of partner, the middle word of life. So this is the way I
Yeah.
look at it. If you take 100% of your investable savings, what have you, right? I'm trying to come from a point of wisdom and
Mm-hmm.
not what everybody says, right?
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, when it comes to retirement, having money is the most important thing, not the interest rate you made in '03 and '04 and average, blah, blah, blah. Having money is the most important thing there is.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to inflation and in hedging inflation, well, like we just said, I mean, oh my God, I used to be a smoker, right? In high school, they went to $1 for a pack of smokes. You know what they cost today?
Oh, huge.
$14. The
I
thing,
don't smoke, so I don't know, but
I
yeah.
quit a long time ago. I've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars since I quit smoking,
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of thousands. But back to the inflation thing, you don't know what it's going to be like, right? So how can we hedge against something we don't even know is going to be there? And so having money is the most important thing. So my rule of thumb, and I'm not an asset guy, I don't sell assets, what have you. And when people ask me, my thing is, I am not, for me personally, I'm not putting 100% of my future in somebody else's hands that has no floor and no net. That's just not wise to me. And so I'm going to break things. I'm breaking my money up 90, 10, 80, 20. 90 to 80% of my money is going to end up someplace that's got a floor and a net. For the sake of argument, whole life insurance, annuities, something that's a contractual obligation. I'll take 10 to 20% of my income and I'll go throw it in a speculative investment.
Mm-hmm.
That's my advice on the
We
asset
do,
side.
there's always risk to the stock market. There's no question about that. And
It's
yes, you
100%.
do.
There's 100% risk, not some. It's 100% risk involved
But then it
because
goes to
it's
risk
all
tolerance. We do
speculative.
have enough data. We have over 100 years of data of markets being up and down, and what the rate of return is in the long term. And if you look at that, yes, there's risk, but in the bigger picture, where you're a couple decades at least away from needing the money, then the reward to risk is pretty decent, isn't it?
Well, it's a different, you look at the way the world is today, and we've seen the ups and the downs, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you look at the late 90s, the dot-com, oh my God, we're all going to be rich and rich. And then bam, just like the housing market. Oh, it's going up and 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 up. It's always going to go up. What happened? Bam. Well, you look at today, we have an overinflated housing market, right? Prices are just too high. Forget interest rates,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, rates could get down to 3%, homes are at $1 million, and you're still going to have the same problem.
Right.
That's going to have to correct. Now, if you look at the stock market, just based on the Dow Jones, it's $42,000, $41,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, these stocks, they're being sold at 29 times of earnings. We're paying 29 million for a $9 million or a $1 million company,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is that inflated? I mean, to me personally, if you look at the stock market, how many of these companies can survive just by selling the goods and services they offer?
Mm-hmm.
I would suspect very few. So if we all just stopped investing our money with these companies, could they survive? Would they all fold up? Well, if they're folding up, then we're investing in bad companies. If they can, it's a Ponzi scheme. If they cannot keep their companies running without our inflow of cash every Friday from 401ks, then it's not a very wise place to put your money as far as I'm concerned. Plus, again, the overvaluation. Everything is overvalued. Our property that we pay tax on, it's a totally manipulated situation behind the scenes, because our property taxes are tied to the school system, and our school system's tied to bonds, which is debt. So it's just a bad deal, and and I'm not saying anybody's subversive, but from the public standpoint, we got to open up our view, peripheral vision, and start taking more of a quantitative look. Look at the measurables, look at the data. Let's look at the real stuff instead of opinions and, hedge against inflation and, all these words that these people use to get our money out of our hand. And if you want to go to the debt side, the credit side, that's why we're here. That's my area of expertise. And I can tell you that, there's millions of people that will extend you credit, millions, either individuals and companies. And they'll tell you the same thing that the asset guys will tell you. Well, low rates and low payments. And, it's like going to a mortgage broker and you walk in and say, Steve, I want to pay my 30-year mortgage off in 15 years. Well, what's he going to tell you? Let's take an application, Steve, and get you a 15-year mortgage. Now, why would he tell you this? Because he wants you to believe that's the way to get to a 15-year payoff, and that's how he makes money. Now, if you came to Bill Westrom, I'm not a broker. I don't get paid for getting people loans. I'd say, all right, Steve, let's calculate a 15-year payment on your 30-year loan, because you only need a 15-year payment to pay off in 15 years. If you want to pay your 30 years off in 10 years, make a 10-year payment. Well, people say, well, what about the interest? The interest rate's lower on a 15-year mortgage. Well, you're right at the top. But if I've done the math and I can show anybody the numbers, but if you make a 15-year payment on a 30-year loan and then calculate the interest rate you paid, it's going to be almost identical to the 15-year rate you could have got if you refinanced. Because the interest you pay is not based on the interest rate, it's based on the balance. And if you can affect the balance, then you affect the effective overall interest rate based on the real money spent. You follow? Yeah. So there's an example of how, if you walk out into the real world and talk to the professionals, this is what they're going to tell you. Let's take an application, right? And when it comes to credit cards, the rates are killing people. Well, the average credit card debt's about $6,500, right? And at 24%, that's nothing on $6,000. Yeah, it's more than 12. And nobody likes to pay a high rate, but it's only $6,000. That's not bankrupting anybody in this country. And if the $6,000 credit card debt's bankrupting somebody and they're living paycheck to paycheck over that credit card, there's other issues. They're not making much money, or there's other issues than that.
I would agree with you. I wouldn't take I'm a bankruptcy attorney. I wouldn't take a bankruptcy client who had only $6,000 in debt, because you look at the attorney's fees and costs of a bankruptcy, you're probably going to pay a third of that just to file the bankruptcy.
Precisely.
That doesn't make any sense to deal with the debt.
Yeah. But now if we look at that, okay, we look at rates, we look at balances. Now we look at the terms of repayment, right? And on that credit card, most people don't know how credit card payments are calculated, because it's not an amortized loan. You can't put it in an amortized table for, this rate and this payment and get a payoff term. There is none. So how do they calculate the payment? It's simply a percentage of the balance. 1%, 1.5%, 2%, it's totally arbitrary up to them.
Right.
Now, if let's say the rate goes up, which means the interest goes up. Now, if the interest goes up, but the percentage they were using wasn't enough to cover the interest, the new interest, then they've got to bump it up to 3%. Right. And that's when the payment goes up, because balance times rate divided by time equals interest due. And if they're how they calculate their payment, if the payment doesn't cover the interest or not enough principal for payback, then all they do is they just adjust the balance. But you haven't made any headway on paying back the debt, because they're just adjusting the payment to make sure they get their interest on a monthly basis. So it's those terms of repayment, right? And following minimum payment, that's where the problem comes. And it's the same way with cars, even though those are amortized and you've got a set payment. It's the terms of repayment and the mentality of the consumer that says, well, I got 360 payments, or I got 72 payments on the new car. No, you don't. Those are just the minimums that the bank has set and you've agreed to pay back the loan. Nobody said you have to take all those months to pay it back. You're in 100% control of the repayment of that loan. Mm-hmm. It's just that under, traditional mentality, make that minimum payment and, and then try to save and budget. And, when you look at we talked about the numbers. How can anybody save any money when it's all being consumed based on what they've been told to do to live the American dream and have a stable future?
Paying all that interest. And there's a big difference, of course, between a house and a car. With a house, you have an arguably appreciating asset. With a car, it depreciates the minute you drive it off the lot. So you're getting less value for money over that period of time while you're paying interest on the amount that you pay for the car. Well, that's true. In a lot of ways, it's better to save up. My father-in-law used to do this. He would save it up. It's tough the first time, but he'd save enough money until he had the amount of money to pay cash. He made a car payment to himself, and then he'd buy the car for cash. And then make payments to himself again for another 6-7 years.
Yeah, well, how old is your uncle?
My father-in-law, but
your father-in-law.
He passed away at the ripe old age of 95. But
yeah, well, I tell you what, in the 30s and 40s, 50s, you probably could have done that, but we don't live in that world anymore.
He did it for many years into the 80s, 90s.
Okay, well, I tell you what, but he's a different cat, right? I mean, he's a generation.
A lot of people, aren't disciplined enough to do that. But my point is,
well, they don't have the money. They don't have the money, Stephen. 6-month emergency fund. I agree with that 100%. That's a great thing to have. Forget inflation, because again, if the shit hits the fan, you just want to have money, right? To feed yourself. You don't care. But a 6-month for the average family, that's $18,000 to $48,000. It's $3,500 to $5,000 is the average monthly nut for your average American homeowner. Mm-hmm. Right? 6 months. That's $30,000 minimum. And when, how long is it going to take if you only got $500 left over because you got a $750 car payment, you got another $500 car payment for the kids, you got a $2,500 mortgage payment, you got a couple of credit cards, no big deal. And then you've got all the accoutrements of life, right? So some of you, $500 a month savings for an emergency fund. It's going to take years to build up that 6 months. The question is why? Because of the way we've been taught to distribute our paycheck through 401ks, managing our debt, low rates and low payments. We're just following the rules of those that provide us these services and goods. And that, and again, I'm not putting anybody down for making a living. I just want the public to understand whatever they tell you up front, ask them what's on the other side of the coin. Mm-hmm. Right? Like all the good stuff about hedging on inflation and tax deferred on the asset side. Okay, that's all well and good. But let's look at the reality of life. What's on the other side of this? No floor, no net. Who knows what the tax rate's going to be? It's just nothing but speculative.
Mhm.
But on the credit side, this is why I like working on the credit side and talking about the credit side, because it's all absolute numbers. There's no speculation about it.
Mhm.
You sign up 500 grand at 4%. There's the payment. There's the interest. And we can dictate where we can look into the future, know exactly where we're going to stand, whether we're accelerating or making regular payments. Same thing on credit cards. All of it on the credit side are absolute numbers. And that's why I guess this is a good segue into what I'm doing with credit line banking. And why I've been able to do it for so long is because they're absolute numbers, just like the paycheck. It's absolute. We can see where the money's going, taxes, 401ks, etc. And so when it comes to the credit side and the absolute of the numbers, that's where my real expertise comes in of being, so I was telling you earlier, being quantitative in looking at things by the numbers and the measurables and the data versus the quantitative side, the surface stuff of, oh, low rate, low payment, it's good debt, don't pay it off.
Mm-hmm.
And from that quantitative standpoint, and dissecting somebody's budget and what their numbers, basically, and this is what I need from people is what do you owe, what do you earn, and what do you spend? That's all I need to know. Mm-hmm. And from there, I can start finding the leaks where the money, where there's too much money going out the door to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, i.e. paying back debt, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And when you start breaking it down and you look at, okay, 35 to 45% is going towards debt. Well, why? Because we're following their rules. Credit line bank.
Those rules, and you mentioned, we've talked about what the conventional wisdom is. Let's talk about your approach, and you mentioned credit line banking. How do you advise people is a better way to go? Let's talk about that.
Well, and you would put this in one of your questions is, what can people do to get more control of their money?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right?
That's part of it. Yes.
Take control of your money. Mm-hmm. Take control. Quit sending it all out based on somebody else's terms in terms of repayment. Mm-hmm. We've got a favorite saying we like to say around here: be lean, liquid, and independent. Mm-hmm. Lean meaning minimize the money going out the door to other people. Mm-hmm. Now, part of that is budgeting. All right. And I'm going to tell you flat out, I don't talk to anybody about their budget. Budget is a lifestyle. That's it. 100%. No matter if you make $5,000 a month or 50 grand a month, your budget is your lifestyle. And I never talk to anybody about their lifestyle. We're all grown adults. We all work hard. And why should anybody tell me what sort of lifestyle I'm going to live? If I want to drink $6 cups of coffee because I work my ass off, I'm drinking $6 cups of coffee. Doesn't matter what you think. You follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So when it comes to budgeting, it's be fiscally responsible and it's up to you. We all know when we're sliding that card and shouldn't, Right. And if you're paying for things you're not getting value for, like a gym, shut it down. Don't pay those people thinking it's going to motivate you to go. Don't. You know what I mean? And you can always go back. Anything you cut out, you can always go back, But when it comes to the debt, that's where I come into play. Because, again, we don't have to live under their terms. Accelerating the payoff of debt is going to cut your interest costs, guaranteed, reduce costs, tax, money going out the door. And then you've got that payment. You can do anything you want. Right? Like, I don't know how many people that I've worked with that we paid off debt and they immediately use the same strategy, the same dollars, the same money to start building up the investment. So if they put the savings investment side on the shelf for a minute to get rid of this debt, this anchor, then if you can pay off 20 grand in a year of debt, then you can invest 20 grand a year doing the same thing. It's all the same money. It's all a matter of controlling it and where it's going to go. And when you run credit line banking, you're actually taking ownership and control of the debt because you're running everything through a line of credit that you control. Mm-hmm. So let me go deeper into that, shall we?
Yeah. Well, what is credit line banking? Is the next question.
Okay. Credit line banking is actually banking through a credit line. And if you break that down more, it's just changing the flow of the money. Now, for your listeners, it's going to be a little hard to visualize this stuff. And that's why, I'm hoping people that want to learn more come talk to me, because I've got visuals that I can show you exactly how this, from a schematic standpoint, how this all looks. But while we're here, if you look at traditional banking, we get a paycheck, it goes into a checking account, and we redistribute our money through the economy, paying creditors, paying vendors, and paying merchants. That's how we work. Now, behind the scenes, the bank, you're dealing with the bank. What does the bank do with that money? Because when it hits that checking account, they take ownership of the money. That's their business model. By law, they have to keep 10% in reserves, right? Now that's all Federal Reserve stuff. But the bottom line is, it's the agreement that when we swipe a card, checks, auto drafts, they're going to make the payment. But they're taking 90% of our money and leveraging it into the stock market, Wall Street, whatever they do. They're leveraging our income for financial gain. Agreed? That's the traditional way we do things. And I'm not begrudging anybody about it, right? That's just the model of how we operate. Now, what's the end game for that? Well, we deposit as a nation, we're depositing about 17 to 18 trillion dollars into our checking accounts. You think of that. Mm-hmm. That's what, I mean, 18 trillion that we push through those checking accounts. What is our return on our investment by supporting the banking system? Zero. We get what we're paying for. That's our reward. Well, you got a house because of the bank. You got to buy your coffee because of the bank. Those are our rewards. They're profiting billions and billions of dollars on a quarterly basis by letting, and this is the key, leveraging our income for financial gain. Mm-hmm. Now, let's move to credit line banking. With credit line banking, you're pushing your money into a line of credit and paying your bills out of that line of credit. And so what you've done, when you push that money from a checking account to the line of credit, you've taken the bank out of the picture. They don't have access to your money because you're practicing leverage. Because when you push your income into a line of credit, it's treated like a payment, correct? Mm-hmm. And that pushes your balance down. So if you could either make a $500 payment and you're going to push it down by maybe $250, or you can push your $5,000 paycheck into it and push it down by $5,000, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And so that lower balance equals lower interest. So if you had a $10,000 balance on a credit card or any line of credit, and you push $5,000 in, well, your new balance is $5,000 because you just paid off $5,000 with your paycheck. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So you've cut the balance in half, which means you've cut the interest cost in half. Pay interest on $10,000 while your check sits in your checking account, or pay interest on $5,000 because you've pushed it into the line of credit. You see how you've saved interest? You pay interest on $10,000 or pay interest on $5,000. Your choice.
So you're incurring debt on a line of credit.
No, you've already had debt. That's debt that's already occurred.
And then I'm not following. Right? Where's the line of credit come in? What do you, as opposed to putting your money in a bank for which you're receiving free services to manage your money, and then you're writing checks for people to still do that, or paying through ACH or whatever it is to pay the bills. They're facilitating those money transactions, financial transactions, and unless you're paying a monthly fee for the account for essentially nothing. So how does credit line banking come in? How does a credit line come in to replace that checking account for paying the bills?
Hang tight. We're not replacing your checking account, because the world expects you to get paid into a checking account, and the world expects you to pay your bills out of the checking account.
Okay.
Right? So we're not getting rid of those mechanisms. We can't. We're not changing anything on the outside world.
Okay.
What we're doing is we're taking that line of credit. Let's say, for sake of argument, you got a $10,000 balance on your vehicle, right? You've been paying on it for 4 years. You got $10,000.
Okay.
Well, credit line, and that comes with a $350 payment, mm-hmm. right? Well, with credit line banking, we go get a line of credit, whether it be unsecured line of credit, home equity line of credit, or even a credit card, right? Mm-hmm. That we're going to pay those people off. We don't need if I get $10,000 in resources, then why do I need to pay those people? It's all it is, a matter of a payment against an outstanding balance. We don't need their help. So let's take 10 grand of our line of credit and go pay the car people off.
Okay.
Right? Now that the payment goes away, you don't have to send them a payment. You just increase your cash flow by $350 by making them go away. You follow?
Right.
And now we flow our income into that line of credit, 5 grand, right? And we pay that 10,000. Now you know where the $10,000 debt came from in the line of credit. That was this whole point. Where did the 10 grand debt come from? We used our own line of credit to pay off our car. Now we own the debt. That 10,000 is now under our ownership in our line of credit.
But then you have to pay back on that line of credit
of
at their
course.
interest rate, don't you?
Well, yeah, but you got to pay somebody back. I mean, if you owe debt, it's either you pay them or pay yourself.
Well, how you're not paying yourself, you're paying you're trading one debt for another. You're one loan for another. You paid off the car loan with money from a line of credit. Now you've got to pay back that debt to the line of credit at their interest rate. How is that different? How is it better? Is what I'm not getting.
Because now, first of all, you got to understand that line of credit, it's like a credit card. Okay. It's no different. It's a credit card. When somebody gives you a $10,000 credit card, they don't care what you do. Go spend, but all they care about is you make the interest payment on the other end. They don't care anything about it.
Right.
You own the debt. They've given you access to $10,000 in the credit card debt. Nobody's calling you to say, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Etc. It's your debt. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so an unsecured line of credit or home equity, they're exactly the same thing. You've got ownership of that debt. All they care about is getting interest that you owe them. That's it. Okay. So they don't think this line of credit is owned and controlled by the bank. It's not. They just have their name on it. They're just a service provider. Okay. You follow what I'm saying?
They're still a lender that's giving you money at a particular interest rate. So unless the interest rate on the line of credit is significantly lower than the interest rate on the car loan, where's the benefit? You still owe somebody money.
Okay, you're right. Okay, so let me get to the benefit. Remember I was talking about you can affect the balance with your own line of credit, right? So let's say you had a 5%, you got a 5% on your car, right?
Uh-huh.
And you've got 10% on the line of credit. Okay.
All right.
And then you're going to be pushing your income into that line of credit. Okay. And so if you have 10,000 in the line of credit and you push it down to 5 grand, then you've just cut your interest cost in half without
by giving them your entire paycheck from what you're telling
them. But see, that's the whole thing. You haven't given them anything because it's a line of credit. It's got a revolving door. Right? If you gave your paycheck to your mortgage company, your car company, you did give it away because you can't go get it back.
Okay.
With a
you pay down the line of credit, you turn around and take out more.
Well, no, hang tight. So we got 10,000 and we push it down to 5 with our paycheck. The 5 grand is what they're going to charge us interest on. And that's exactly the same as 5% on the 10 grand with the car company because we cut our interest cost in half by manipulating the balance.
Okay.
So we stop there. Now, here's the big part of my service in credit line banking. I help you establish bill pay day. My customers pay 95% of their bills are paid on one day. The other 5% are outliers that wouldn't play ball with us. All right. Now, why do we do that? Because the longer our income sits in that line of credit, the more interest we save. If we treat it like a checking account, then that average daily balance is going to continue to go up and up, increase per month, which means we're paying interest on everything we're buying. So, but with credit line banking, that money doesn't move for 29 days. And then on bill pay day, the money comes out of the line of credit, back to the checking account to pay everybody like they normally do. Right? So you're banking through the line of credit, not from it. Deposits go in, money comes back out. Right? Now, a lot of people think, oh, I'm borrowing money from the bank to pay my bills.
Right.
No, you're not. The only reason you'd think that is you think that the bank has ownership of everything in that line of credit. They don't have ownership of anything. Nobody can go into your credit and get money out of it. They can't. It's not their line of credit. It's your line of credit. They just have a name on it. Okay. And so when you go to pull money out for your bills, you're not borrowing money. You're going to get your income because that's where you put it. And why did you put it there? To suppress the balance to save interest. So you're not borrowing money to pay bills. You're just going into a different bucket than you're used to go get the money to pay your bills. Now, for sake of argument, we put in 5, and let's say we took out $4,000 for expenses, right? So that would leave you $1,000 left over in your checking account, right? 5,000 in, 4,000 out, leaves you $1,000. Follow? But when it's in the line of credit, that $1,000 acts as a monthly payment against the debt. So we started at 10, we pushed it down to 5, right? And then we pulled 4 back up to $9,000. That would be our month-end balance. 5,000 plus a $4,000 withdrawal gives us a $9,000 month-end balance, correct? So we reconcile. We started the month at 10,000 in balance. We ended the month at 9,000 in balance. Follow? We put in $5,000 to save interest. We spent $4,000 in expenses. That's $1,000 left over. So you see what's left over of the 5,000, our surplus, discretionary income, positive cash flow, is identical to how much we paid off for the month, right? 9,000 versus 10,000, 4,000 or 5,000 minus 4,000. There's $1,000 payback. And if you could average $1,000 a month on that debt, you've got that car paid off in 10 months. And you probably paid, your effective interest rate's probably going to be about 4%, 5% based on the real money spent. And I know that I can see in your eyes, this is a tough thing to visualize, right? And that's why I tell people, don't try not to get lost in this conversation and think I've been drinking all morning. Come talk to me and let me show you the visuals and let me run the numbers. Right. Because it is all just about the numbers. The numbers do all the work. And it's just push it down. It's a stair step that's got a lot more oomph because you're playing banker, right? You're actually you're taking your money away from them to make money, and you're doing it for yourself. You're just doing it on the credit side of the ledger. But the numbers work all the same. The numbers don't, a balance and an interest rate, whether it be on the asset side or the debt side, it doesn't know any, those numbers don't know what side of the fence they are. It's just going to be an interest rate gain or interest rate cost, but the numbers all work the same. And that's why credit line banking is such a powerful program, is because we're combining consumer banking with business banking and C-suite executive banking all in one for the consumer to get more out of the system that they're actually working in. Because all these credit companies, they're not gods. They don't hold dominion over our lives because they lent us money. They're not, it's not like going to Uncle Joe and if you don't pay Uncle Joe back, he's going to come beat you. That's not the way this works, They're just service providers. Right. You agree to utilize their resources, their loan, their money, and you agree to pay interest for as long as you owe money. And that's the big thing. How long do you want to owe the money? They don't dictate, you dictate. Just because they said 360 months doesn't mean that's what they're telling you to do. That's the minimum to keep everybody happy. But they don't dictate the rules of payback at all. They really don't. So,
well, obviously a lot to unpack here and to understand. And I understand you've written a book, Master Your Debt. Does that get into this credit line banking and break it down for folks? They got your book?
It does to a certain degree. There's only one chapter in that book specific to the strategy that I contributed. And that's why the guy allowed me to be the co-author. We were actually going to write a full book on the strategy, but his book agent said, ain't going to sell. Got to do it differently. So that's why it just came down to my chapter. Okay. And that was written back in 2010. And I'm just going to be honest with everybody. Don't go looking for the book. because you're not gonna, it'll explain it to a certain degree, but it's old stuff. I mean, that's 14 years ago. And
Okay.
I've really refined this process to be much more than what's in that book. So bypass the book and take a free phone call with me because you're going to get a lot more out of the phone call.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, people want to know more about credit line banking. Tell us how they can reach out to you. I'll put it in the show notes so they can look it up later and reach out to you to get more information.
Yeah, I hope people do. I know this is confusing. I sound like a nut job, but you know, you're talking about statistics. Statistically, most businesses go under within 5 years. Agreed?
Yeah, sometimes
And
faster than that.
sometimes faster. I believe the only reason that happens is that the public doesn't want what you offer, or they can't trust you. There's only really those are the two main reasons people go out of business.
Hmm.
Well, I've been here for 19 years. And so if you look at my tenure in this thing, I got something people want and I deliver on it every promise that I'll ever make. That's really why I've been in business for so long, is that, you know, I built my whole life and my business is built on three values: honesty, loyalty, and common courtesy.
Okay.
That's why I've been here for 19 years, because those are unbendable and uncompromisable.
All right. Well, I'll get that into the show notes for the folks. They can look that up and reach out to you to learn more about this. And I appreciate you coming on to the show and telling us a different approach than what most people hear about how they should handle their finances and something worth looking into. So
Well,
thanks for coming on the show, Bill.
thank you, Steve. Appreciate you.